I'm half Native American. How can I be both Catholic and Native American? This is a very good question. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say I was doing some research into various spiritualities, Native American spiritualities, and I will say I am by no means an expert when it comes to these sorts of spiritualities. So I'm not going to address the question specifically regarding Native American cultural heritage. But in general, when we talk about ethnic backgrounds or cultural backgrounds and its relationship with Christ, we can see how it's supposed to relate in the Acts of the Apostles. When Paul is going to preach the gospel to the people of Athens, he is taking a Semitic religion and bringing it to the Greeks. He's crossing cultural boundaries here. And when Paul gets there, when he gets to the Areopagus, he addresses the people and says to them, I see that you are a very religious people. When I was walking by, I saw an altar to the unknown God. I am here to proclaim this God to you. Now, why is this important? St. Paul is taking what is present in the Greek culture of his time and bringing out the good things in it. He's taking what he sees to be what was now called the Semina Verbi, the seeds of the word, the places where Christ has already been speaking to this culture, and then takes it and uses it to preach the gospel. He takes what is good that Christ has already established in this area and then brings it to its fullness. And so we see this happening throughout the church's evangelical mission. When the church goes into a new area, she finds what is good, what is holy, what is beautiful, things that are already pointing towards God, and then takes them and uses them to proclaim the gospel. I'll use another example with something I'm a little bit more familiar with. When the missionaries were going to China, they were celebrating the Mass according to the Latin Rite. And in the Latin Rite, there was a very specific thing that a priest had to do. He would walk in wearing his biretta, and then when he got to the sanctuary, he would take off the biretta and then go in. However, in the Chinese culture at the time, it was seen as disrespectful to take your hat off in the presence of someone who is your superior. And so what they ended up doing, and they got permission from Rome to do this, was they would actually wear a very specific hat, the jijin, throughout the Mass. It wasn't allowed anywhere else, but that was what was necessary and important in this culture. And so the church took what was good, this recognition that God is beyond all things, that you would recognize him as being a superior, and then treated him as such as seen in this specific culture. Again, to reiterate what I've been saying, the church goes into a new area to proclaim Christ. It takes what is good in that culture. It takes the things that are already pointing to Jesus and then uses them in furtherance of this gospel. So to the question at hand, can you be both Native American and also Catholic? Well, embrace the parts of your heritage that are good, true, and beautiful, because there are things that are good, true, and beautiful. And then bring those and bring them to Christ. And then you can be both Native American and Catholic. So going specifically to the Native American idea, a great image of this would be Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, who was Native American and also a saint of the Catholic Church. She had her culture and she lived her culture well, but she also brought that to Jesus himself. And so she too brings these two things together. Another thing that you can see this very vividly in is the architecture and iconography, the holy pictures of holy things within the church. Whenever the church goes to a new culture, it takes the things that are present in the culture and sanctifies them. And so when you go to, for example, the American Southwest, you can see that the churches are built in a very specific way. It looks different than they look built in Greece. They take the native architecture and show it. Or the idea of iconography, the way that we show pictures of the saints or of Jesus. The icons usually adapt to the place that they're in. And so you see, like, for example, when Jesus is being portrayed in Europe, he's oftentimes portrayed as whatever European nation they are, whether that be German or French or something else. When Jesus is brought to Africa, usually Jesus is presented as an African man. The iconography, the artwork, is used to show forth that this message is for this culture as well. That this message isn't bound simply by the Semitic cultural identity of Jesus' time, but goes out to all cultures and all times, because Christ is here for all of us.